Top 5 most underrated F1 drivers who never got their big break. Formula One is a brutal sport. It's not just about talent, it's about timing, politics, and having the right car at the right time. For every Lewis Hamilton or Max Verstappen who lands in a dominant team and racks up championships, there are countless drivers who had world-class skill but never got their shot at greatness. Some were trapped in midfield machinery their whole careers. Others made one bad career decision that sealed their fate. And then there are those who were simply too outspoken, too unlucky, or too ahead of their time for the F1 system to embrace them. Today, we're diving into the top 5 most underrated F1 drivers, the ones who should have, could have, but never did become champions. 5. Jean Alesi, the man who bet on the wrong horse. Jean Alesi was the definition of a driver who deserved better. He was fast, aggressive, and fearless. The kind of racer who could wrestle a bad car into a result it had no business achieving. When he burst onto the scene with Tyrrell in 1990, it was immediately clear this guy had it. His battle with Ayrton Senna at the Phoenix Grand Prix that year became legendary as he fearlessly went toe-to-toe with one of the greatest of all time. Then came the career-defining moment, an offer from both Ferrari and Williams. This was no small decision. Williams at the time was building towards total domination. Ferrari, meanwhile, was Ferrari, full of history but in total disarray. Alesi, a lifelong Ferrari fan, followed his heart. It was a catastrophic mistake. Williams went on to dominate the 1990s with multiple championships. Alesi, meanwhile, spent the decade dragging unreliable, uncompetitive Ferraris to the finish line. His raw speed constantly wasted by mechanical failures and poor strategy calls. Despite his undeniable talent, he won just one race in his entire career, the 1995 Canadian Grand Prix, when in another universe, he could have been a multi-time world champion. Alesi didn't lack speed. He lacked the luck to be in the right car at the right time. 4. Robert Kubica, the champion who never was. Robert Kubica wasn't just good, he was special. From the moment he stepped into F1, his ability to extract every last drop of performance from a car was clear. In 2008, driving for the underdog BMW Sauber team, he managed to win his first Grand Prix in Canada, and at one point, he even led the championship. But what happened next was pure team mismanagement. BMW decided that instead of fighting for the title, they would shift all focus to developing their 2009 car. The decision completely sabotaged Kubica's championship hopes, and by the following year, BMW pulled out of F1 entirely. With no top team calling, Kubica moved to Renault in 2010 and put in performances that made Ferrari seriously consider signing him for 2012. He was that good. Then, tragedy struck. A horrific rally accident in 2011 nearly cost him his life and severely injured his right arm. His F1 career as a top-tier driver was effectively over. Kubica was one of those rare drivers who had both raw speed and technical brilliance, the kind that world champions are made of. But fate had other plans, robbing F1 of a driver who could have been one of the greats. 3. Nico Hulkenberg, the unluckiest man in F1. Formula One is full of painful statistics, but few sting as much as Nico Hulkenberg's record. 181 races, 0 podiums.
Hulkenberg.
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 Sag's mal ein bisschen männlich.
Hey!
Hulkenberg.
Hulkenberg. Nico Hulkenberg.
Nico Hulkenberg.
This isn't a case of a driver who was never good enough. Hulkenberg had blistering raw speed and an ability to perform in changing conditions. His pole position in Brazil 2010 in a midfield car and in tricky wet conditions showed that he could go toe-to-toe with the best. Over his career, he put in standout drives for Force India and Renault, leading races and fighting against much stronger machinery. So why didn't he ever get a proper chance at the front? A mix of bad timing and bad luck. He was frequently on the radar of top teams, but was always just a step too late. Ferrari considered him for 2014, but stuck with Kimi Räikkönen instead. Mercedes never took him seriously as an option. Red Bull, never interested. Despite his talent, Hulkenberg was never in the right place at the right time, and F1 doesn't wait for anyone. He should have won races. He should have had podiums. Instead, he's known as the best driver to never taste champagne on the podium. 2. Chris Amon, the unluckiest driver in F1 history. Some drivers are unlucky. Chris Amon was cursed. Amon had all the talent in the world. He was fast, fearless, and technically gifted. Ferrari believed in him so much that they hired him as their lead driver in 1967. And yet, despite being in race-winning positions over and over again, Amon's luck was so bad it became legendary. If he was leading a race, his car would break down. If his car was finally reliable, a puncture would take him out. If a teammate was driving the same car, they would win while he retired. The joke in the paddock was simple. If Chris Amon became an undertaker, people would stop dying. He raced for 13 seasons, drove some of the fastest cars of his era, and never won a single Grand Prix. If there was ever a driver who deserved even just one, it was him. Juan Pablo Montoya, the most explosive talent. F1 wasted. If there was ever a driver built for pure racing, it was Juan Pablo Montoya. Montoya didn't just race, he fought. He went wheel to wheel with Michael Schumacher and beat him multiple times. He had the aggression of a street fighter and the talent to match any world champion. He won 7 Grands Prix, took pole positions in a Ferrari-dominated era, and looked like the guy who could break Schumacher's stranglehold on the sport. But things didn't go as planned. Montoya's biggest problem? He didn't fit into F1's political games. Williams had speed but not consistency, and by the time they were competitive, Schumacher and Ferrari were too strong. McLaren signed him in 2005, but the team was a mess, and Renault's Fernando Alonso dominated the season instead. He clashed with team bosses, media, and F1's rigid structure. Instead of sticking around to play the PR game, Montoya did something that no other F1 driver had ever done before. He walked away. Mid-2006, he quit F1 completely and went to NASCAR, where he became a legend in American motorsports. Had Montoya been in a dominant team like Mercedes or Red Bull today, he could have been a multiple-time world champion, but F1 never fully appreciated his raw brilliance. Conclusion: F1 is brutal, and talent isn't enough. Formula One has never been fair. Some drivers get all the right breaks, while others, no matter how talented, get stuck in the wrong car, the wrong era, or the wrong politics. Jean Alesi chose the wrong team. Robert Kubica had his career stolen by fate. Nico Hulkenberg never got his big break. Chris Amon was cursed. Juan Pablo Montoya was too raw for F1's corporate world. So who do you think was the most underrated F1 driver of all time? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to Formula One Dramas for more F1 history, deep dives, and brutal analysis of the sport's biggest what-ifs.